This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz is my favorite Disney villain, for one central reason: his ridiculously convoluted backstories. And I don't think I'm alone in that opinion. The reason I believe Doofenshmirtz works so well is that his many tragic backstories serve to create a sympathetic character, while simultaneously serving as setups for some really great jokes. What you have as a result of those two things is a hilarious character who an audience empathizes with. So join me today as I gather all of Doof's backstories and rank them based on humor, how they serve Doof's story, and obviously personal preference. I just want to start off by saying that unlike a lot of my previous ranking videos, this one doesn't really have an entry I dislike. That being said, there are a few that just aren't as memorable as others, and Doof's backstory from Season 2, Episode 20's That Sinking Feeling is one of those. Now, to this backstory's credit, it does show us how Doof acquired his iconic building, explaining that the reason the building was so cheap was due to the fact it was located near a lighthouse that attracts noisy ships at night. I do think one of the reasons this one doesn't rank as high is because it takes place when Dr. Doofenshmirtz is already evil. One of the best parts of Doof's backstories for me is getting a glimpse into his childhood, learning more about Drusselstein, or why Doof decided to devote his life to being evil. This one just doesn't have those elements. The fact Doofenshmirtz considers not being allowed to swim in public pools to be emotionally scarring is hilarious. Honestly, I'd argue that what his mom did in this situation was a good thing. Heinz, do you understand how filthy those things are? Doof's unsuccessful magic career isn't my favorite backstory of his. It's by no means bad, but it is a little repetitive. It's essentially one joke repeated 3 times. The joke being Doof accidentally getting sprayed by a skunk instead of pulling off whatever magic trick he was trying to do. Add that to the fact it's very similar to another significantly funnier backstory, which I'll get to later in this video, and it kinda just falls flat in comparison. Knowing that the two things that made Doof's miserable childhood bearable were garlic ice cream and his pet cockroach Hoarfrost is hysterical. The main issue with this backstory is that it's pretty short. Don't get me wrong, I do think it accomplishes what it sets out to do, which is provide Doof with a motivation to create the Combinator. I just think there are more compelling backstories further on in this list.
The triple scoop garlic roach corn!
In this backstory, Doof explains that when he was a child, his father bought him a model train table, but wouldn't let him play with it.
But we bought it at the toy store.
We did, but the way I'm using it makes it an adult thing.
Honestly, this is probably gonna be me when my future children try to play with my Lego Millennium Falcon. Wow, looking through all of these backstories has made me realize how many skills Dr. Doofenshmirtz has. He's an inventor, a phenomenal performer, and a great dad. If only there was a way I could learn some new skills. Oh wait, there is! With Skillshare, the sponsor of today's video. Making videos like these requires a lot of writing, and as a result, I found myself gravitating towards Skillshare's intuitive writing courses. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, and more. Skillshare can help you take your career, skills, hobbies, passions, or side hustles to the next level. I've been really enjoying Storytelling 101, Character, Conflict, Context, and Craft, taught by New York Times best-selling author Daniel Jose Older. Skillshare has also recently announced some exciting improvements, including smarter class categories, 3 new class topics, as well as the ability to find classes by software and material. All you have to do is share a little about your interests, and from there, Skillshare immediately comes back with recommendations tailored to your goals. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today. And once again, huge thanks to Skillshare for making this video possible. Doof being disappointed by the Leaning Tower of Pisa because it didn't have any pizza never fails to make me laugh. The only thing that really holds this one back is that it's told via PowerPoint slide rather than Doof's traditional backstory formula. This one is above all other flashbacks on this list solely because I like the Doofenshmirtz quality Bratwurst jingle.
Doofenshmirtz quality Bratwurst.
This is a backstory that I honestly forgot existed, but I'm glad I was reminded of it when creating this video. Not only does this backstory reveal that Doofenshmirtz's father owned a prize-winning show dog named Only Son, the reason being that the dog was like the son he never had, which is a joke that will never not be funny to me. But this backstory also gets bonus points for introducing these square Chewbacca-looking creatures which made a couple reappearances throughout the run of the show, including my personal favorite piece of Phineas and Ferb media, Phineas and Ferb Across the Second Dimension. I don't know. I just like the look of these guys. They look so goofy. I love it. The amount of jokes and characterization packed into this 30-second flashback is impressive, even by Doofenshmirtz backstory standards. I also like how we see a version of Roger that seems genuinely remorseful after accidentally ruining Doof's painting. Normally, Roger is characterized as being arrogant and selfish, or at the very least, blissfully unaware of how he and his parents tormented his older brother. So it's nice to see his character be written with a little more empathy than normal. This one is pretty short, but I do love the escalation of the situations Doof finds himself in. The last one, where his building has exploded and a fireman is lecturing him to not make a mountain out of a molehill, sends me. I don't know about you guys, but I love a good carnival soft pretzel, to the point that even if it looked like this mess that Doof created, I'd still probably try it. I don't know what's funnier about this backstory, the fact that Doofenshmirtz is able to build complex innators, but can't form dough into a pretzel shape, or the fact he's cast out of Pretzel Palace and declared unworthy of pretzel making. Now, I really wanted to put this one lower solely because it generated all of those fan theories about Doofenshmirtz being Phineas's father, but I can't because it's just too good. Without spoiling too much about this one, because you should really just go watch it for yourself, Doofenshmirtz goes to a drive-in movie with Linda and forces her to hide in his trunk so that he doesn't have to pay for her, after which Linda unintentionally gives Doofenshmirtz the idea to conquer the tri-state area. Thanks, Linda. Honestly, out of all of the future evil scientists to inspire, it's probably good that it was Doofenshmirtz. If I had a nickel for every time there was a Doofenshmirtz backstory involving a public pool, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Doof explains that in Gimmelstump, jumping off the high dive was an important rite of passage, but when it was his turn to jump, he was too scared. The backstory itself is great, but I think this little joke at the end is kind of underrated.
After that, my father and I became increasingly distant. Suna!
Remember when I said there was gonna be a backstory similar to the magic one, but significantly funnier? This was the one I was talking about. This backstory is also split up into 3 separate events, but I think it's executed a bit better. A young Heinz Doofenshmirtz enters a science fair with his very first innator, cleverly titled Innator, but loses to a baking soda volcano. The next year he creates an even bigger innator, but loses to a baking soda volcano. Years later, after temporarily deciding to quit science and pursue poetry, he is once again defeated by a baking soda volcano. Apparently, Doofenshmirtz was incredibly gifted at making hand shadow puppets, to the point he had a girl interested in him. Unfortunately, he was upstaged by another puppeteer named Huge Hands Hans. Hans was terrible at making hand shadow puppets, but his huge hands helped him steal Doof's girl. My favorite part of this backstory is that it was apparently so devastating that Doof couldn't bear to participate in the art of hand shadow puppetry ever again. Right off the bat, I love how there are multiple characters from Drusselstein with hyper-descriptive alliteration in their names. Big Black Boots Boris was Doof's bully and would constantly kick sand in his face, to the point it made him paranoid. I find it hilarious that the only location Doof is safe from Big Black Boots Boris is at the beach. In this backstory, Doofenshmirtz explains his parents were expecting a baby girl, causing his mother to spend months knitting dresses. When the baby was finally born, it turned out to be a boy, and since they were out of material, Doof was forced to wear those same dresses for an entire year as to not waste them. I'm mostly just impressed that the dresses fit him. How big did they expect the baby to be? The second dimension version of Doofenshmirtz is undeniably more intimidating than the evil scientist we're familiar with. I mean, look at him. He has a scar going over his eye patch. It's reasonable to assume that this version of Doof would have some crazy dark backstory that caused him to be so evil. Nope. He just lost a toy train when he was a kid. This, in my opinion, is a near perfect subversion of expectations. I also love that all it takes to defeat evil Doofenshmirtz is giving him back his old train. Honestly, I don't blame Doof for wanting to wipe this viral video from everyone's minds. I want to do that with my YouTube channel all the time. But yeah, skating headfirst into a toilet looks pretty bad. I don't have much else to say about this one. The reason it's so high is because it's just so memorable. I love a good callback to a previous episode. This flashback features a Doofenshmirtzified version of Love Handles, You Snuck Your Way Right Into My Heart, all about Doofenshmirtz and his mother's love being inexplicably linked to Kickball, which in concept already sounds hilarious, but the execution makes it even better.
How do you like that, Perry the Platypus? Love handle in my flashback. I was heading to a golden land of opportunity, a land with a pioneering spirit which welcomed misfits like me. But I ended up in America instead.
Honestly, based. This is probably Doof's most iconic backstory. Not only was it the first one, it set the tone for all future backstories with its blend of comedy, tragedy, and absurdity. It introduced the sad violin music that later became a staple of nearly all Doofenshmirtz flashbacks, and it showed us our first glimpse of Drusselstein. What can I say? The writers knocked it out of the park on their first go. I will admit, this backstory has the unfair advantage of being a bunch of hilariously unrelated backstories in one. Doof talks about being raised by ocelots, working at the carnival dunking booth, not as the guy in the booth, but as the guy they threw, and of course, most notably, he introduces us to his best friend in the whole world, Balloony. A balloon with a hyper-realistic face drawn on it. I also love how this backstory ties into the lawn gnome backstory. Honestly, it would be number one if it wasn't for one single backstory that I think is slightly better. This is the perfect Doofenshmirtz backstory. It's so tragic and so absurd that it wraps back around and becomes hilarious, which, in my opinion, is what every good Doofenshmirtz backstory should do. It also has my favorite joke in the entire show.
It all began on the day of my actual birth. Both of my parents failed to show up.
Anyway, that's my ranking of every Doofenshmirtz backstory. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on my next video. I'll see you next time.